Hey guys, Ja with JRSP, Johnson Reality Self Protection. So, in the last video, I said that this video was going to be about the second Seardo thrusting palm or palm thrust. So, in Seardo, we use terminology like that because Seardo is the simple, effective, aggressive, realistic way. And so, everything has to be simple so people can understand it like easily. Like, instead of trying to like teach you Japanese or something, or like make everything like super complicated, like other systems do, making things like man, that's what's a good example. Um, well, in boxing, you got your jab and your cross and your hooks and stuff. That's really like, and then you got your pivot punches and your shovel hooks and stuff like that. Like, people haven't heard of those, but like everybody's really heard of a jab and a cross and a hook. But you got other techniques, your pivot step and you got other techniques that like people haven't heard of. In other systems, like they make things super complicated, especially the foreign systems like martial arts systems and stuff like that. They make things super complicated. Like, so, um, in Seardo, I made Seardo to be super like basically easy to understand. In my opinion, like, I mean, uh, maybe my terminology is going to be super complicated as well. But how I look at it is, anything that comes straight out from the body, that's a thrusting movement. And that's why we call it a thrusting, or a palm thrust. It could be a palm or thrusting punch. Like, we don't really do punches here, but we sometimes we do study punches because kind of like it's very instinctual. But it'd be a thrust punch. Anything that comes out from the body is a thrusting movement. Okay, if it's something that is turning, basically you turn your body. Like, we call that a turning movement. Basically, it's like it's a turning punch because you're turning your body. We could say, some people said, well, it's like, you know. Rotating would be better terminology, but really not, because like it's not as easy to understand and you're getting more like technical. you know we try and make things super simple to understand so people can grasp it really easily. So, any technique, like what I say, like, oh, it's a hook, it's a overhand or whatever, stuff like that. They're all turning movements. You're turning your body. Okay, so that's all turning. You got thrusting kicks, you got turning kicks. We don't study a lot of turning kicks because you only want to, in a self-preservation situation, like systems that teach you to, kick high and stuff like that. First and foremost, I did Sanda kickboxing for 7 months. Okay, so that was a kickboxing system. And let me tell you right now, in order to achieve some of the kicks that we did, you got to get there like at minimum 5 minutes before the class so you can stretch and get those muscles warmed up. Because, I mean, if you don't like warm up, you could tear something and whatever. And let me just say, grandma who's 58 years old, who doesn't go to the gym, she doesn't get on the elliptical or the art trainer or whatever, stuff like that. She's just enjoying her youth, and she's like enjoying the grandkids and stuff like that. And she's just lucky to be as active as she is. Okay, she's not throwing no freaking high roundhouse kick or round kick. Okay, she's not doing it. Okay, so if in Seardo we have some kicks, but they're all low line kicks, and I still don't recommend them because, hey, you want to be able to keep your like center of balance, basically. And if you're lifting up your leg, now you're trying to balance your weight and stuff like that. But you know that's just what it is for us. our terminology is super simple: thrusting and turning. You have thrusting movements and turning movements. So, getting that out of the way, uh, like the first palm thrust is just your straight kind of average traditional palm thrust. You know, some people may throw it like this. Some people may throw it like how I throw it. You know, I don't freaking put my thumbs like this or whatever. I don't freaking bend my fingers in like some type of trying to do some type of tiger paw or whatever strike. My hands, you know, are out like this right here, and there's no telegraph. I'm not going to do this right here and then, you know, launch it. It's just coming up, and I'm hitting with this portion of the hand. That was the first palm thrust from Seardo. We've already gone over that, but maybe I didn't go over it in as good a detail as I just went over it. But the second Seardo palm thrust is going to be the rotating Seardo palm thrust. And now you're like, oh, you just went over all this turning stuff or whatever. No, this is different. And like this one comes out and it rotates. Okay, like kind of the same concept. It's a different move. It's a different movement, but it's the same concept as if you were gonna turn that fist. Okay, but with turning the fist, you can still launch that straight out. You really don't have to flare your elbow out. You can launch it right out. With this technique right here, you're gonna this. It's got its pros and it's got its cons. Okay, like it's gonna be a little bit more powerful, in my opinion, than just the straight palm thrust, but it also opens you up a little bit as well. So you really got to pick your moment when you throw this. You got to see that opening and know that you have the shot, because if you don't have the shot and it's evaded, you know, now you're open for a shot to your floating ribs. But how this one kind of comes, it's like that right there. You know, the elbow does come up. Like I say, you know, some people will be like, oh my God, that's a horrible movement. Okay, well, at the end of the day, there's no perfect movement in a situation where it could be life or death. You know, somebody's trying to take your head off your shoulders. Okay, they're mad, you're mad, or whatever, something like that. Maybe you're not mad. Maybe you're just trying to defend yourself. Somebody's trying to hurt you. You're out in the wild. There's no referee to stop it. You know, and you know it's moving. That's just something that a lot of people, they never really address. Okay, all these people talking about pressure points and stuff, you know, I think we talk about how pressure points are bullshit. I mean, they exist, and you know they could be effective if maybe you've trained for 30 years and you know, like, and you could slow down time, I guess. Like you have that ability to slow down time, and so then like when somebody's coming in, you've trained for 30 years, know exactly where that point is. That's probably the size of the tip of your finger, and since you are superhuman and you can slow down time, you know, when a person's coming in, you have all the time in the world to, you know, strike that little tiny point that and freaking that makes them shit their pants or whatever, you know what I mean? Like other than that, you know, we live in like simple, effective, aggressive, realistic. That's what Seardo's about. We live in reality here. Okay, the situation is going to be moving, and you're not that guy. Okay, you are not Hiro Nakamura from the show Heroes that is like got canceled a while back ago that I loved. Okay, like I love that show, but you're not him. You can't time travel and you can't stop time and you can't slow down time. Okay, you're not that guy. Hiro Nakamura was that guy. You're not that guy. It's like maybe Justin Shinbom is that guy, but you're not that guy. Okay, so we got to live in reality. Okay, the situation is going to be moving. Okay, so people talking about, you know, pressure points and talking about perfect movement and stuff like that, you know, it's like a lot of times they don't like account for, you know, yeah, this person, we're out in the real world. In reality, there's no referees, there's nobody gonna break up the fight and stuff like that. This person's moving, I'm moving, and stuff, and so I'm just trying to survive. Okay, so I'm not trying to execute perfect movement. Um, so people who talk about that, a lot of times they're demonstrating uh, something, and they're doing it in a way where it's like, well, like that's all good in a perfect world where the person is completely compliant, and it's like everything goes your way. You won the lottery, $1 million lottery and stuff like that, and you know you've never been in a bad situation, or you've never been in a situation where like it didn't work out in your favor. It's like, then yeah, it's like go for perfect movement, like, but in reality nothing goes the way that you want it to go, and so you shouldn't even plan it. Okay, like, I think it was Mike Tyson who said, everybody has a plan until you get hit in the face. um yeah, we never try and plan any type of fight. In Seardo, we don't train in um like what's the word I'm looking for? We don't train in sequence. We don't train in forms and stuff, like where you see people like, oh yeah, like jab, cross, hook, uppercut. We don't train like that. That's stupid, okay? Because you train like that, jab, cross, hook, uppercut, that gets you set into those movements right there, okay? And so then you're carving that into, as Mark Hatmaker would say, your neural nets. So now when you're in a situation and it's moving, you're going to be trying to jab, cross, hook, or hook, uppercut. you know it's like, and your brain is going to be stuck on that. We don't train in sequence or scenario. That's basically scenario when you're training, jab, cross, hook, uppercut. That's scenario. We don't live in scenario in Seardo. We train in repetition, okay? And you train both sides, okay? It's like, if I'm going to be doing these rotating palms, I'm going to do so many here, then I'm going to get into my other stance, and I'm going to do so many, the same amount here, and I'm going to train in repetition, okay? Because Bruce Lee once said, I don't fear the man who's trained 1,000 different punches or whatever, so the 1,000 different techniques or whatever. I fear the man who's trained one technique 1,000 times. And what he meant by that is, or what I feel he meant by that, is that, and I feel this way because I understand it. Like, the person who's trained one technique 1,000 times can do 1,000 different things with that one technique, because he's trained it so thoroughly that he knows, like, how to use it in many different ways. Like, so whereas the person who trained in 1,000 techniques, oh, he's got 1,000 techniques, but he's a master of none of them. Like, so that's what I feel Bruce Lee was saying. But in Seardo, we have very few techniques. I mean, we have a list of techniques, but they're in certain categories, and ultimately, there's very few techniques. But we don't train in a bunch of different techniques. We train repetition of a very few techniques, and so ultimately, you should be able to adapt the system and the techniques to, like, it's considered like a toolbox. Like, you may not have the absolute right tool for the job, but you got the toolbox, and so you're gonna have to use this tool and that tool, and like, and combine some things and get some super glue and whatever and stuff like that, get some like gorilla tape, and voila, you got a rubber ducky. So yeah, we don't train in scenario, we don't train in sequence, katas, forms, and stuff like that. We train in repetition, um, and we train simple things. And so over here on Bob, and we train in aggression. Okay, to be aggressive. Like, aggression is going to be one of the most important things, because we're not the 30-year black belt here who's trained in martial arts for 30 years. we're just an average Joe. I made Seardo for the everyday person because after 9/11, people sat on those planes, and a lot of people say, oh well, it's a conspiracy, and nobody was on those planes and whatever, and we blew up those towers and whatever. A lot of people say, all I know is no, 3,000 plus people died um, that day. And between combined the Pentagon, uh, the Twin Towers, and 93, which 93 is like a big, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? 93 inspired me. Like basically, 93 is what kind of or the story of 93 is what is kind of like what created Seardo, because I remember I was 12 years old when those planes hit those towers. Okay, I was sitting in school, and you can't even make this up. Okay, just like a week or two before, we just had done a a project on like the tallest buildings in the world. Okay, and we just learned that the trade centers used to be the tallest, but now there was some other building that's taller or whatever, and we just learned that. And then um like a week later or a week or two later, you know we're sitting in class, and a substitute teacher like basically just bust in to the classroom, and she's like screaming, and she's like just frantical, and she's like, there's been a terrorist attack, turn on. She tells my teacher to turn on TV, something she should have never done, because I was 12 years old. Okay, and I was sitting in a classroom of people who were also 12 years old at that time, and maybe a little older, maybe a little younger. Okay, but none of us needed to see that, because we saw people jumping out of those towers. Okay, like that, we saw that it was not censored or whatever the news was going. This was crazy. Okay, and that changed me forever, because those people, it didn't take a genius to understand. Well, I mean, they're jumping from like two of the tallest buildings in the world, and they're jumping from an extreme height. And they were jumping to get away from the flames, because to jump to they knew they were going to die either way, and to jump to their deaths was you know in their mind at that moment, they only had seconds to make the decision. And in the seconds that they had, they felt like jumping was better than burning to death, and it's heartbreaking, you know. But what I'm getting at there is ultimately, that was a tragedy that happened in America, and what that taught me was, we'd always grown up in America at that point thinking, oh, we're untouchable, they can't hurt us, and you know, like that day we saw that major things could happen in America, and but then there was a story in '93 where that we know that plane was hijacked. Okay, we know that plane was going somewhere, but the people on that plane, whether it was a conspiracy or not, okay, that plane didn't go to its destination, because the people, the civilians, stood up against evil. And that's like why in the Seardo credo, never be afraid to stand. Okay, like 93 is what inspired me to like live this lifestyle, because it's like I looked at those other planes. Nobody took those planes to the ground. The plane hit the Pentagon. The plane hit Tower 1 and Tower 2. Okay? Nobody diverted that. But those people on 93 stood up, whether conspiracy or not, and said, no. It's like, we may die today, but you're not having your way. And, that freaking, I remember seeing that on the news, like 93 and stuff, and just like being like, I am never going to be that person who's afraid to stand up against evil, even if it costs me my life. I'm going to stand. And that's why I put that in the Seardo Credo. And even though it's not the top and it's not the bottom, it's not the first, it's not the last, it's in there, and it's one of the most important. Never be afraid to stand. Never be afraid to stand up for what you believe in. Never be afraid to stand up for yourself. Never be afraid to stand up for someone else, okay? Someone who can't stand for themselves. And, that's why that's in there. But aggression is the key, because we're not martial arts black belts, so we got to substitute that with something, and we substitute that with aggression. And so when we come in here, it's like, you do your initiator or whatever that is. If your initiator is like, well, I gotta light up this cigarette, like whatever your initiator is. Mine's putting the hands up. We freaking come in, and I'm like, I don't want no. And it comes in there, and you see that rotate. That palm is rotating. We'll do it slower so you can see. No, and that is the Seardo, the second Seardo thrusting palm or palm thrust. It's like, that's what it looks like. It's like, I don't claim to be the best, like, fighter, and I've told y'all many times, my stuff doesn't look pretty. It's not meant to look pretty. It's meant to be effective. Simple, effective, aggressive, realistic. I didn't come up with the rotating palm. I didn't come up with any of this. This stuff has been around for hundreds of years. I mean, through martial arts and stuff. Seardo is just constructed of the stuff that we know works the best. And and that comes to strikes and stuff like that. And then we know, I used to watch Joe Rogan all the time, but he's kind of a hypocrite, and he's only about jiu-jitsu. And nothing else works, and nothing else is anything unless it's jiu-jitsu. But, I'm not good at jiu-jitsu. It's like, I mean, I probably could be good at jiu-jitsu, but I don't. If you train in jiu-jitsu, I've trained in jiu-jitsu, I've trained in judo. Look at the injury, ratio of training in jiu-jitsu versus other things. Okay, it's like, you're serious about jiu-jitsu, you're gonna tear your ACL or something. You're gonna get messed up. I can't afford that. I got 2 kids, a wife, 2 kids. It's like, I'm the provider. I have to go to work. I can't afford to be freaking like tearing my ACL, freaking breaking my arm or something like that. But Joe Rogan's always like, oh, nothing works other than jiu-jitsu. But you know what works other than jiu-jitsu? A freaking knife, yo, okay? Let a jiu-jitsu guy, freaking get a hold of me. And it's, it's poking somebody in their eyes won't work. Well, when they get poked, with a knife, okay? It's like, that's going to be a little bit of a game changer, because this is lethal force at that point. You're not going to, you freaking got me in a rear naked choke and I got seconds? Well, I'm going to be stabbing you that whole time. Bro, maybe I pass out, maybe you break my neck, but you're going to have a story to tell, and you're going to be telling the hospital how you got stabbed 42 times. So that's why I'm training in the Medusa system, okay, as well as my own system. And Seardo already had, knife components to the system, and I'm just going to integrate Medusa right in to Seardo and keep on going. But hey, you guys, that is the Seardo palm thrust number 2. Always remember, aggression. It's like, you just gotta drive. So, you guys take it easy.